Hello and welcome to Intuition Fridays. You are joining myself, ASHALA Yardley, and my wonderful co-host, the inspired Penny Kelly. Welcome, Penny.
Hi, hello, happy
Hello.
belated Thanksgiving, happy early Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes, such a potent time of year, and we're right on the heels of the Gemini full moon. So today, Penny and I are going to be picking up where we left off. I think it's 3 weeks ago now, with this topic around bloodlines. It sounds like Penny is bringing in a discussion around the role of the Knights Templar in protecting the bloodlines, how these specific bloodlines were able to resist control because of the frequency that they had basically coalesced over generations, and where that leads us in today's narrative. Are some of us awakening to those abilities because we have connections to those ancient bloodlines, and so on. So that's where we're going to be going today. That's just a brief synopsis. And before we get started, I'm going to bring your awareness to a few things. So basically, this is us coming to you live, Intuition Fridays. And we don't do every Friday, but I believe we are doing next Friday. Is that right, Penny?
That's right. Yes. And can you hear me? I adjusted my microphone.
Yep, can hear you great.
Okay.
You can find Penny over here at pennykelly.com. This is her website. You can access her courses here. There's a link to go to the place where you can get her courses. You can look at her books and all the other products that she has on her website. Just waiting a second here for this to pop up. Oh, it's taken too long. Okay. There it is. Woohoo!
There you go.
Yeah. Lots of material and more on the way, it sounds like.
Yeah, I have a new audio book. See that Robes book with the little red thing up in the corner? I have my first audio book, and I'm going to be recording 2 more this month. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
And of course, you can find me over here on the Beyond Mystic consultations page, where you can book a 1-hour session with me. These are a combination of intuitive psychic readings, also with the tarot, obviously. And please remember to follow us here on the Beyond Mystic Rumble channel. And also, oh, my screen is going so slow today. Also, like, share, and subscribe over here on the Beyond Mystic YouTube channel. Okay, let's get cooking here, Penny. Where should we begin?
Oh, I'd like to begin with this. I'd like to continue, actually, with the whole thing about bloodlines, because I think we're coming into a time where we need something to hang on to pretty seriously. And I think that we need to wake up a lot more people, and that is something that's been on my mind. And so I think sometimes if you know a little bit of your history, you have the courage, I guess I'll say, the courage to move ahead and to say, okay, this is where I'm going. This is what I know. This is really what's important. And we're at that point. We're definitely at that point. So in the conversation that we had the last time we talked, almost the closing message of that conversation was my speculation that the elves who had brought me the circle, a card, and a stone, and I was like, what is that about? And we talked about all that. But it turned out that the circle with a cross in the center of it is an ancient symbol of a kingly or queenly bloodline. And in the days of the patriarchy, they say kingly bloodline. In the days of the matriarchy, it was the queens who ran everything. The men were the domestic people. They stayed home, took care of the children, all that. And they did a fabulous job And actually, it wasn't until I was studying some of that way back history, and that men took care of the children, did the cooking, did the gardening, did the weaving. That's when I really began to realize that, wow, men love their children the same way that women do. We often hear about a mother's love, but my gosh, that father's love is right in there with it, right, right up there. So, so we have this history of the matriarchy that is pretty suppressed. It's pretty interesting. But the thing that the women did was to keep an eye out for people who developed like a more expansive consciousness, and they would work with that consciousness to expand that even further. And some of that was done with sex. So, that adds a very interesting angle to the whole sexual thing. But the goal was to develop a bloodline of people that easily, naturally had Kundalini type awakenings, whether it was a moment of intense oneness, where if you've ever had one of those, you don't forget those. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. You become everything. So that's what the women were doing. That was very suppressed. The women were disenfranchised. The men took over. It was quite a long struggle, hundreds of years of struggle that culminated in the rise of the Christian church. And the Christians were very, very, they were descended from the Jews, actually. And the Jews had been the ones who started that whole suppression of the matriarchy. Like, we're not having this anymore. We're not doing this anymore. We're not staying home taking care of the kids. You stay home. And women were badly treated for a long time. But the bloodline thing was not, you could suppress socially and financially, in all those other ways, but you didn't really wipe out a bloodline. And that then, what happened in terms of Jesus, I think his mother was part of that bloodline. That's the first thing. The second thing was that he then inherited some of that, even though he was male, which I think was wonderful. And he tried to, he was just so aware right from the beginning, and he woke up early, and the rest is history. Okay, we all know the story, even though some of that story has been tweaked a little by the church, by the Christian church. So we end up with this amazing bloodline. Jesus and Mary Magdalene have this intense relationship, sexual relationship. I don't know if they married or not, or if they just, we would say today, did they just hook up? I know that sounds a little crude, but, they had 3 children, and those children carried that bloodline. And that bloodline had, when Jesus was killed, everybody associated with him went into hiding. And they say he was killed. There's argument as to whether he really died or whether he went into hiding. And I've heard just recently that he lived till he was 87. And I thought, okay, all right. I'm not going to argue, but the story that we've all been taught is that he died on the cross. And that really was the end of it. Well, it wasn't. The result of that was that Mary Magdalene fled, taking her children with her, and went into hiding and became known as the Black Madonna. Her children she was very carefully protecting her children, and she did a pretty good job. That's what the Templars were doing, was protecting that bloodline of people. And believe it or not, and thanks to the Jews, they kept really good genealogies. They tweaked some of them, but mostly they were the only ones that brought like written records. I don't know what everybody else was doing, Although if we ever had a point in the past where we were all digital, as soon as that gets wiped out, there goes all your evidence. Poof, it's gone. So, it's good to have paper backup.
Well, and how many of the libraries were burned? How many of the documents, there was a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence all the way throughout history. There has been, right?
That is so true. Oh my gosh. And they did successfully destroy a lot of things for a long time. So the Templars come up into power. They've been secretly protecting the women. And that's where that whole, what do they call it? The Romantic age came in. The romance music.
Chivalry.
That's it. That's the term. There you go. The chivalry arose as a way of, I'm going to honor the women and be a gentleman, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the cover for, I'm really honoring the bloodline. So the Templars became, because they were also very interested in an expanded consciousness. And that's part of what the Magdalene continued to teach and to be, was a demonstration of that. And some of those Templars had these extraordinary psychic abilities that they developed. And they became very rich and very powerful because of it. So I'm not sure that I've got some gaps in my story. I'm sure I've read it, but it's probably gone. But I think it was 1309 or 1307, somewhere in there, the Templars were taken out on Friday the 13th.
Yes.
13.
Yeah, I don't remember the date either, but yes.
Yeah, I think it was 13.
A major component of their organization was,
yeah, they were all arrested,
basically. Yeah.
But they had a spy network that was it was infiltrated into everything. And they were aware that they were going to be arrested, and all their gold, they had become huge masters of gold. And so they packed up, they collected all their gold, packed it up, and took it to Scotland. And from there, they went to America. And there were some Norse sailors with them who had been coming and going. Columbus did not discover anything. So, the true story of Columbus is like, OMG, that isn't even close to what we were taught. So anyway, Henry Sinclair was, I think, one of the men who had been hauling back and forth to Nova Scotia and Canada.
Oak Island.
What's that?
Oak Island is where the treasure is supposedly buried. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Templars were much more savvy than just Oak Island. I think they did leave some there, but they came into, they came down the coast into Massachusetts and some of that area in there, and then they moved across the United States. Well, it wasn't the United States back then. They moved across North America, and they brought these big. They had some carvers, and they hid the gold in various places all the way across North America, and they marked those places where gold had been hidden with these big flat stones that were about 2 feet by 4 feet. They're in dimensions and about 1.5 inches thick. And each one of those stones was carved with runes. I think the Norse people actually did the carving. But so they spread that immense treasure out so nobody would find like the spot.
Yep. The mother lode.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's jump to 1987. Okay.
Mhm,
So I'm married at that time, and I have this dream that I'm going to buy a house on 32nd Street, and it's going to have 8-foot or 9-foot ceilings. It's going to be old, and it's going to be an old time house, etc. Long story short, my husband comes home one day and he said, "Hey, I think I found that house you've been talking about, and it's for sale." So we bought it. We bought it. And so I transplanted my business over here and started doing readings and consultations again from over here. And one day this woman makes an appointment, comes into my office and brings this gigantic, thick book with her. It turned out it was a photo album, and turned out that she was the granddaughter of a man who had owned the farm before we did. And she's showing me all these pictures of the farm. And we come across 3 or 4 photos of these 3 guys standing with this big flat stone, standing up. It was about 4 feet tall, and they were leaning on it like this. They had on white shirts and bowler hats. I was like, oh, wow. And you could see the carvings, the runes on that stone. And I said to her, "What's that?" And she said, "That was a stone that was found on the property. Grandpa was out plowing, and he hit that stone. He thought with the plow, and he stopped the tractor. He was going to move the stone so he didn't hit it again. He thought it was a little stone. It was way bigger than he could move, so he had to get some help. They brought it up to the barn." She said they took pictures of it, and she said it floated around. It was always in the way. Finally, they took it out and buried it somewhere. And I said, oh my gosh, really? Why didn't you contact somebody and ask them to interpret the runes? What did it say? She said, well, we thought maybe the Indians had that, they had done that carving. It turned out the Indians had been the guides for the Templars who were dispersing the treasure. So,
Wow.
so that, nothing happened for quite a while, probably 25 or 30 years, when I learned that the Templars had buried their treasure in various places and then left these flat stones with runes on them depicting, where so many feet and so many steps and which direction and turn here and go there, and you'll find the treasure. So what has really been interesting to me is when, and this goes back to the work that we did in the lab, when you touch anything, you leave an energetic fingerprint. Nothing ever forgets anything. It energetically impacts everybody. And so those Templars, with their attempt, they were all of a higher consciousness. They were attempting to protect not only their wealth, but still keep their legacy of we're protecting the bloodline. When they touched that gold and moved it, that left an energetic fingerprint, and that energetic fingerprint then impacts everything around it. And I think we have a legacy, especially in North America, that it's an energetic legacy that would serve as the boost to the awakening of consciousness. And this is the time for that boost to be happening, for people to fish around inside themselves for any kind of awareness or any kind of, worry that they have, and get a hold of that and examine that and ask, what can I do? What can I say? What could be the response to this kind of fear, this kind of threat, and hold that in a place of peace within themselves. And we'll get through this next 2 years, which is looking a little shaky, there's a lot of people who just don't, they aren't there in terms of understanding that we have this opportunity coming at us to move into a different kind of world. and I don't want them blowing it up and ruining our chances to have a different kind of world. So, so all of that is now beginning to come together. Why were we so successful? Was it because that those are like energy seeds planted in 13 something or other?
Wow.
That just, that have helped us all the way along. And
that's amazing, Penny. This is amazing. Really. I mean, it's such a fascinating story, and I've heard bits of it before, but I love how you've sort of, chronologically lined it up for us so we can see how that relates to the story of America. And I want to indulge just for a minute and go two directions because I'm a Gemini and it's a Gemini full moon yesterday. But also because it feels like what I'm hearing you say is it's important for us to relearn the history. Why? Because not just to get sort of drunk on data, but to recognize that we're actually, as we identify more and more with the sacred history of our origins, we realize we are these divine beings. All of us have connections to these divine lineages, which come from ancient, technologies and ancient wisdom traditions. So we are remembering, literally, we're going back and putting together the pieces. So I feel it's important to look at the history, the chronology. So many people are fascinated by, uncovering alternative historical narratives right now. And I've been following this like you for decades. What I've discovered is it's less about knowing the exact 100% truth and more about starting to see the larger themes where no matter which alternative narrative you go towards and the storyline, you start to see so many crossovers, so many major themes that indicate that we're on the right track. There's definitely so much to what you just shared. And once we know more about that, we relearn who we actually are. And then we can tap into these frequencies and say, it's not just in my imagination, or I'm the rare one that has these, sensitivities or awarenesses. We see, wow, we are all so much more rich in our intuitive ability, in all of these different, I want to say, spiritual strengths. And let's recover those. What I'm hearing you say is this is an invitation to join with, the stories and the truth about who we are and recover that.
That's right. Recovery is what is, I think, the stage that we're in. Recovering ourselves, recovering our country, recovering our planet, recovering our symbols, recovering our meanings, recovering everything. It's like we've been drunk with illusions for hundreds of years, and we're in danger of losing the whole ball of wax. We really need that recovery.
We do.
Yeah.
So can we go, I'd like to go back over what you just shared, because I have a couple of points that I want to go a little deeper with, because I think they're relevant. And when you were speaking about that in the 1300s, when the Templars knew that in a way the jig was up in Europe and they were about to be sort of co-opted, which I believe they were already totally infiltrated at that point. And that's why they have such a dubious reputation in a lot of ways. So they then, a faction of them said, let's move the gold, or maybe they already knew this was a prophecy that the gold was going to be relocated to another part of the world. And is that possibly why Columbus and crew were sent out by the you know,
I
the
wasn't going
cabal
to bring
elite
that up, but
that
that's
they were
right.
sent out, supposedly looking for the Spice Islands, but they were actually sent out to look for the gold. They already knew what the Americas were, and they were like, you guys go find that gold. Why were they looking in
Yeah.
South America for El Dorado, right? Like, so there was this whole, they knew, and why were they told to scour the entire continent from one side to the other looking for the gold?
Yeah, Columbus had a friend. I think he grew up with this guy. His name was John Drummond. And I'm not sure about all of the genealogy of Drummond, but either his father or his grandfather was Sir John Drummond. And that Sir John Drummond was one of the people who had been back and forth to Iceland, Greenland, and the Americas for 100 years before Columbus even made his first proposal to the king of, I think it was Portugal, and Portugal turned him down. So he went back and made a second request, and I think the second one was to Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. They turned him down, but because they had some other exploratory expedition going on. Well, that expedition came back with nothing, didn't find anything. I don't know if they didn't go as far or what, but because Columbus was best friends with John Drummond, whose grandfather had been back and forth, Columbus set out with an entire circular globe, I think it was financed by Galileo, or no, Da Vinci, who said the earth is round, and here's how the maps fit, and here's what the people who have already been to that new land have discovered, and go for it. And so he went to Ferdinand and Isabella a second or a third time, and they finally said, okay, the guy we sent out came back with nothing, go ahead. So he left in August of I don't know, 1491 or 1492, something like that. Came back less than a year later, eight months later. He was back with 6 brown-skinned people and all kinds of gold and some exotic birds and some other things. Just amazing. And people in Europe were like, oh my gosh. And the brown-skinned people didn't wear any clothes when they first found them. And so people were like, oh my God, these are heathens. There was a whole culture of terribly, I'm going to call it prudish and foolish attitudes toward the human body that was happening at that point in 1492. And so that started this whole back and forth thing between the Indians, the leaders of the Indian tribes in North America and Canada. I think the Mi'kmaq Indians were the first ones, but they started traveling to Europe, and they got close, and they started giving these salons, just like we do today. And they said, what are you guys thinking? You're not honoring the great spirit of life. You're not honoring the body. You're not, you're destroying everything. What is the matter with you? Is what it came down to. And that conversation went back and forth for hundreds of years until the settlers started coming here more and more. The Native Americans got pushed out, pushed back, murdered left and right on purpose in so many ways. It was really tragic. Talk about genocide. And so here we are today. Yeah. And the true history is not known, and some of it's kind of painful, I think, to contemplate. But where we're at is that the people who have done all the pushing and all the murdering have risen to places of great power now. And we have to match that. That's what it comes down to.
Well, Penny, I think it's just extraordinary that we had right after that, like the 1300s, the early 1300s, interestingly, it's around the time that the tarot emerged. There was all these mystery school traditions that were brought from the East, and I mean, we could just talk for days about all the layers of the order of things that happened then. But then right on the heels of all this comes the Inquisitions. And next thing you know, we have all the witch burnings. So the attempt to extinguish this, like the Cathars, for example, all of these bloodline, high technology in terms of spiritual technology. And these people that had these, we call them mystery traditions, these practices of initiation, as you say, to awaken the Kundalini, to be able to be, so aware and so intuitive that they could, in many cases, at least outmaneuver these controllers that were trying to keep to dominate them. But also the effort to extinguish that had to be so dramatic and so like extremely violent, because it was just, exploding, really. It was like humanity's consciousness was coming out and people were awakening, kind of like today. And there was still these power dominant systems so fully entrenched, and they had their game of power dominance and control with religion and state and military and all of that stuff. So, they had a plan. They still have a plan. And these spiritual abilities that you're referring to were like so sought after. And, of course, the dark side wanted all of their people to have these abilities. And so they were always trying to pull people over, blackmail them, basically attack them and their families and so on. So we see movements like the Knights Templar and the Cathars that got supposedly completely wiped out. But what I love about where you're going is that we're now seeing, oh, they weren't completely wiped out. They transplanted energetically, perhaps even physically, perhaps even bloodlines in the Americas. They transplanted into these other locations on the planet so that at this time there could be this reactivation and right?
You're right. You're right on track. Keep going.
So, I mean, I want to ask the cards a question. Can you think of what would you like to pose to the cards so that we can bring in that a little bit, and then we'll go on to wrap up with where you want to go with this.
Okay, I actually wrote down a question before we started, and the question is, what is the impact on our governments, that's plural, over the next 12 months of moving into higher consciousness? And my thought was, if I was doing it, I would pull one card for 3 months from now, one card for 6 months, one card for 9 months, or one card, and one card for a year. So 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, just to see
4 cards.
What's
3,
the impact?
6, 9, and 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's the impact on our governments over those next 12 months if we move into higher consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're moving. We're already moving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Mm-hmm. And I feel as though, what we didn't have going for us back in the Middle Ages during this revolutionary turning point, was that we didn't have the awareness of the collective knowledge that we have now with the internet. This is such a big difference. Having the collective awareness that we have and the ability to, but there's so much material to sift through. I think that's what's hard for people, is how do you make sense of you know, retelling these historical narratives. There's a lot of different versions of revisionist history, and you know, it's a lot to go through. I've been studying it for decades, so have you, and you know, I feel pretty happy with generally seeing, as I said before, there's these themes, there's these patterns. You don't necessarily have to know 100% of the truth to get the gist of what's going on.
Exactly.
So, but I do believe that people who aren't as open-minded get caught in the weeds of it all. They're like, I don't know, this person says this, that person says that. It's all a bunch of rubbish. I'm just going back to the original status quo belief system.
Right.
Which is really unfortunate because
Yeah, if they could derail the people who are not, don't want anything to do with any of this. They could derail the whole thing with, let's have a war. Let's, you know, whatever. It's very, very, we're in shaky ground. And so I think it's time for people who have some consciousness to really stand up and say, hey, you know, just keep your cool. Let's work this out. Well, we will work it out. It's going to work out one way or another. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to lay the cards down now. Let me get there we go. So we are looking at, you said 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and a year, right?
Yeah. What's the impact on governments? 3 months. Oh, wow.
3 months.
Okay.
6 months.
Oh.
9 months.
Okay.
And a year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very interesting.
So I'm gonna go first just quickly here. There's a real like flash, a bloom of high level activation, high frequency. There's a lot of light, a lot of awareness, a lot of like energy. The sun is just like this massive, illuminating, undeniable force, right? So we're going to see this expanded illumination that is going to obviously bring everything to light. Everything will come to light. All the dark corners will be illuminated, and then they won't be able to hide anymore. So 10 of Swords is like give up thinking that you're in control or whatever your strategy is. They're going to have to give in, give up. And then there will be, 3 months, so that we're looking around, the beginning of the fire horse year, like February, right? February 2026.
Yeah.
And then May, there's a real, I want to say almost like a neutralizing point.
Yeah.
And then August, there's a lot of competitive or energetic, posturing. Like this, the good thing is, you know, it's not the tower, it's not the devil, it's not like, it's just working to establish something new. And a year looks like there's new systems in place.
Yeah. Exactly. I wouldn't change it much. You know, it's like, okay, that the light turns on. It's 3 months from now. There's enough of a wave of aha, you know, I see it, I get it. Oh my gosh, I'm excited, you know, et cetera, that the impact on the government is almost negligible. Like they haven't figured out, they haven't caught up with that awakening. Mm-hmm. The impact on the government, but 6 months from now, though, is like, oh, something might have changed in there. But the government, that's that 10 of Swords is a card of surrender. Mm-hmm. So that's a big statement. Wow.
These are very big cards, aren't they, Penny? Like to go from the Sun to the 10 of Swords is like a really big changing of the guards, really.
Yeah, it is.
And then there will be a period of destabilization, as there would, because, you know,
lots of action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, when you're, it's like having to reorganize everything, and that creates, inner, I call this creative conflict, or, creative chaos. It's like the everything has to readjust itself, basically. But
Yeah.
look at this, a new frequency that's based more in natural law,
Right.
divine feminine, like the um, purposeful and practical workings of a healthy society. The Queen of Pentacles is what I love about all the queens of the tarot is that they're a lot more kind of at the level of the people. They're not, the kings are kind of up on their thrones. The queens are a little bit more like in the thick of things. And so this is really a system that works for the people in a much more, like economic, long-term, more holistic system is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That Five of Wands, five it's a number of turning point, turning the corner. Can't go back, gotta go forward. It's messy. And that's also my card of, is it play or is it fighting? Are we play fighting or are we really fighting? It's not clear.
Yeah.
Are they just playing, or they don't look angry? There's, it's like, okay, so that's kind of competitive, but it's a lot of action, lots and lots of action, because wands are action. But that Queen of Pentacles have everything to do with the everyday world. And the Queen, actually, in the tarot system, the queens are way more powerful than the kings. Kings are secondary to the queens. And our tradition is always to make the kings top, but that's not the way it is in the true tradition of the tarot. The queens are the most important. They control the action from there on down to the kings, the pages, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And when you pulled that card, I thought, are the women going to stand up and say, look here, we're not doing this? Or has the return of the bloodline somehow affected us, the ancient queens, and their efforts to promote and keep the bloodline running, because they needed that for the success of their own socioeconomic cultures way back when? So,
We're
yeah,
right back to the bloodlines with this, aren't we? Because
yeah,
it really is. And when you're saying, the queens, the feminine, the matriarchs,
yeah,
this has been my vision my whole life, is that this is returning. But it's not returning. And I do believe there was a time where the matriarchal energy was imbalanced, and it became power dominant and distorted, just like the patriarchy has. And we're going to go into, my vision is that we're going to go into the next 2,000-year cycle of the age of Aquarius, where we're going to, I think the feminine energy is going to step forward first to do a lot of the restoration of a more holistic, cooperative system of finances, economics, politics, everything, decision making, governing, all that kind of stuff. In the Aquarian way. The Aquarian way is decentralized power. It is all about, small local grassroots organizations and groupings, and it's done in a feminine way, not a masculine way.
right.
So I feel like the women are going to step forward first and bring this, like, now that we're clearing out this old dark manipulative power dominant system, let's replace it. Start with the ground floor being very, I want to say, grassroots, very holistic and complementary, a system where we have win-win-win, not win-lose. And the divine feminine can work to establish that in a very non-dominant kind of way, right?
Yeah.
And then I believe that the next wave will be the divine masculine stepping into that container. And then they will start to really work together as a team. And I look forward to those times.
Oh, 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 oh.
Right?
Yes, yes, yes. Where they work together, they're in balance. You know, when you do past life work, you see some things that used to be. And I've seen a lot. It could be so different. It could be so much smoother, so much better. Women tend to think that they have to become a hard ass if they want to be in their power. And that's the wrong direction. That's not the way to go. I mean, sometimes you do have to be pretty darn firm. You know, you have to be like a rock. But otherwise, you know, that's not really necessary. Common sense, love, truth, gentleness, trust, you know, something that says, hey, that I don't think that's going to work. Just having the right input at the right time makes all the difference in the world. And we need that. And let me ask a question. Last night I do a Zoom stream for my community of COCO, Community of Consciousness Online. And I asked the question, what is Christ consciousness? And there were some answers, but there's you know, what do you think it would be? What would you say? What is Christ consciousness?
Well,
Okay.
I have my hypothesis or my perspective on this is that Christ consciousness is the integrative consciousness that has already gone through many, many levels of initiation to be able to integrate the ego and the separate self-identity with the heart and the soul. So it's like an aligned consciousness, but it isn't a state that is like, it's always needing to come into a frequency band. It's not like enlightenment. It's not you don't get to enlightenment and you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm here. I don't have to do any more work. It's like, you know, Christ consciousness. So I call it 77, the frequency of 77.7, which is perfection in the system of, you know, there's always a little darkness. And, you know, obviously the light consciousness is 77.7, but we're always working with the shadow. We're always in that frequency band. So, you know, if you're anywhere between, let's say 70 and 80, you're doing great, because there's always going to be fluctuation. We're not saying, you know, dark energies out there and we're all light. We're saying, you know, we are always integrating with dark energy. And that's why Christ could walk among the most, you know, like degenerate beings on the planet and bring them love and healing and forgiveness. Now, why could he do that? Because he'd already integrated those dark parts of himself. He'd already integrated his own shadow enough that it didn't consume him when it was outside of him.
Yep.
So to me, that is Christ consciousness. It is not some perfect 100% no zero sin. It is the ability to stay in that bandwidth, even around the most dark, evil things, because you've already metabolized your own evil inside yourself.
Okay, that's pretty good. I like that. And it kind of is a long way of describing. I had a conversation. I used to have these conversations with Jesus probably 15, 20 years ago. And I always transcribed those and I would type them up. I lost them somewhere. They got put on a computer that didn't, you know, that got wiped or something. I can't find those conversations. But I asked at one point, okay, well, what is Christ consciousness? And I was concerned about what that was, because the little men in brown robes, when they were visiting me way back in 82, 81, somewhere in there, 80, they had said to me at one point, you know, your task in this lifetime is to teach the world about the mind and consciousness. And to do that, you'll need to enter Christ consciousness. And about that moment, I freaked out, you know, didn't want any part of that. It's like, don't talk to me about that. And I ran out of the house even. It was like trying to get away. But I ended up asking Jesus in this conversation, well, they call you the Christ. So what is Christ consciousness? And it was one word. And I was like, oh, and I've been sitting with that word for a long time. And the one word was, it's awakening. And I said, oh, and there was a little bit more consciousness. It turns out what he said to refine it a little bit more was that it's a process, a constant process of awakening. And that's kind of what you were just describing. Constantly awakening to whatever energies are in you, coming at you, that you're having to deal with. And doing so in a way that is awake to what is. Not to some airy-fairy idea of becoming a doormat. Nothing like that. It's just plain old. It's a constant awakening. So I was like, okay. When you awake fully, like you do in a Kundalini experience, that does rewire you. It does change your DNA. It changes your DNA. Maybe that's what the elves were trying to tell me. I didn't think about that. But that whole process, the more you awaken, because DNA is a set of frequency receptors, what's going to happen when you start awakening? All those new frequencies that you are paying attention to, that you are tuning into, that you are trying to generate, frequencies of love, of patience, of generosity, honesty, whatever, all of those begin to impact your DNA. You can have a massive impact with a full-blown Kundalini thing, which changes all the DNA in your entire spine and brain, but you change that a little bit at a time. And it starts immediately. It doesn't take a long time. Start, and then you forget. And then you go, oh, and then you start again. And you keep on starting again. And that is the constant process of awakening. You just keep on awakening. And the more you awaken, the more you learn. And what you learn is how to be. It's just that simple. How to be what you would like to be, how to be what you think you need to be in various situations. So one of the things that comes with that is this great clarity, auditory clarity, visual clarity, feeling clarity. When you pick up a feeling, it's like, what am I feeling? What am I picking up? That is very, very important because feeling is primary. And some people don't have visual stuff. Some people don't hear anything, but by gosh, they feel. And they feel very, very deeply and intensely.
Yeah.
And then they try to wipe it away. Like that's not allowable. That isn't what Christ consciousness does. Christ consciousness doesn't wipe it away. Just like you said, you're not always in this place where you're, a place of light and beauty and truth and all that. Sometimes you're in a mood. And that is part of that. You're just aware that you're in that mood. You're awake to yourself. Wow. The more you awaken to yourself, the more you awaken to what's going on around you. So I think that's the gift as we enter this Christ season, this Christmas season. That's the real gift. That's the thing that I think Jesus was trying to get across. And all of the prophets and the saints and everybody who has ever tried to teach anything about how to be better humans has been teaching that same thing. So, how long is it going to take us to really get that? Can you even imagine a civilization that is cooperative and working together, listening to one another, doesn't have any big wars, isn't afraid of running out of whatever they're afraid of running out of, whether that's milk or uranium or, the freedom to move across the sky wherever you want to move, or whatever. So here we are.
You know, Penny, I feel as you're saying this that we have sort of two camps in the awakening movement.
Yeah.
And part of what happens when we awaken is we see what you just said. We see, wow, it could be like this. Like we see more of the truth of who we are, what our incredible superpowers are. We see the dignity of our humanity. But more often, as we're first learning and opening to true, revisionist history and seeing more and more of these larger truths, we see a lot of what's been holding us back. We see a lot of the lockdown. We see a lot of the inner blockage, right? Like when I do therapeutic work with people, there's quite a desire in a lot of circumstances for people to focus on what isn't working. I'm blocked, I'm traumatized, I'm broken, I'm sick, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm this, I have all these labels, I have all these blocks. We look outside and we see all the limitations. The cabal is doing this and they're trying to take away that and they're controlling this. So to me, we get on the awakening path, but we end up looking a lot at what is holding us down from awakening instead of looking at what is awakening, opening us up. So you notice that in the truther movement, for example, where there's so much focus on what is holding us down and very little focus on what is opening up. Where are we? Like, if we just keep looking at what's opening, what's holding us down is going to start to naturally disintegrate. It won't be as relevant. So, but I also know as a therapeutic, counselor and healer, that you have to do some work on like releasing what's holding you back. So what do you feel, Penny, around that, the balance of that equation?
I think you said it perfectly. That's what I see. People love drama. And to be honest, we need drama. We need the way that the brain, mind, and consciousness work. We know we're most alive when we're totally engaged with something. Well, if that's something ugly or something, what is it the news media say? People only want to hear bad news. They only want to hear, about murders and all the dramas and the thieves and all of that stuff. Why? It's because that's how we know we're alive. When people are not actualizing their own creative self, they need that kind of drama, because it brings you fully alive. It doesn't go anywhere, though. That's the bad part. It doesn't leave a legacy. And, just recently I was listening to some of the stories of what is the name of that guy? His name starts with a G. Who left? He was a Sumerian character, and he left to go find eternity.
Gilgamesh.
That's it. Gilgamesh. Okay, so Gilgamesh. The whole story of Gilgamesh was never really known, but they found a bunch of pieces of tablet, and then they had AI interpret the whole story. And what it comes down to is Gilgamesh, after all these efforts to try to find eternal life, realizes it isn't happening in this dimension. And so he goes back to Sumeria, and he he had been a terrible, terrible leader. But when he goes back after all these realizations and the loss of his best friend who died, he realizes it's what you leave behind that helps the next generation to take another step. And he has his people go out and check the walls of the city and check the libraries and check is everything up to par? Is it working well? what are we leaving behind? And we need to be thinking like that. What are we leaving behind? If you're just focused on the destruction, that's what you're going to leave behind. If you can get your focus over on the creative side, what do you want to leave behind? That's where you get creatively engaged. And that's where the drama of creation happens within the individual. And that's, I would love to see that kind of shift to creative thinking, even if it's a little bit crazy to start out with, because we don't have a whole lot of experience behaving that way.
Correct. You know, it's interesting. I'm hearing with my ratio of 70-30 that what I see in our truther community, and I've been, you know, doing this myself for many decades as I was waking up, is that we focus about 70% on the you know, the bad news, like the you know, we want to know all the details of all of this stuff, which is important to a point. I think, you know, there's a point where you need to be fully aware and really get to that place where you're like, there's no going back. You're never going to pull the wool over your own eyes again, right? But at some point, what I'm hearing is that we need to shift that, you know, to 30% still keeping an eye on all of that. And the other 70%, let's focus on the new earth solutions. Let's focus on where we're going, like you say, with our consciousness, with our creative energy, and what we're leaving behind. I'm going to bring up this card, which of course you know very well, Penny. This 10 of Pentacles, which is one of my favorite cards in the tarot. And what I love about this card, I call it the legacy, and I see it as actually the final card in the tarot. I call it the, you know, number 78. Not everyone does, but I do, because I see it as the completion of a life well lived, is that you leave a legacy. And it could be, obviously, you know, in this case, Pentacles, it could be material things, it could be money or property or, you know, books, art, whatever it is. It could gardens, you know, and it can also be gifts in kind of your consciousness, your teachings, your impact that you had on so many people. You leave the world a better place. And that's the final step in the whole 78 degrees of the tarot, is to leave the world better than you found it.
That's right. Yes. Yes. And look at that card. See that little strip of black and white checkers running down the side there?
Yep.
That one of the things that you see when you become real, when you're fully awake, is it's black and white. You're not seeing illusions. You're not making up stuff. You know, oh, that I saw that, you know, he meant this. What do you mean you're deciding what he meant? Why do you have to decide what somebody else meant? Why don't you decide what you mean and what that, you know, what that means to you? We just get all tangled up in judging, and we begin to see what's not there. That's a major mistake. You can't have clarity if you're seeing what's not there. And that's part of the problem of waking up. People don't see what is, and they see something that's not, that isn't there. And so there, you know, that waking up process that you just mentioned, and focusing on all the bad stuff, yeah, that's just how it starts. But the more you focus on that, I get yelled at by, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Nellie, my daughter, gives me a hack from time to time. She says, you don't talk about that. And I said, people need to know that so they can make some new plans, so they can decide what they're going to do and how. And she said, but people don't do that. They just only hear the bad news and they freak out right there. You need to tell them what to do. And I'm like, I'm not telling them what to do. So we, you know, we get into this impasse where it's like, okay, guys, you have to see what is happening so that you can design a path around that into something beautiful. and nobody can tell you what to do, although you can look around and see, is anybody else doing that? And copy some of what they're doing, copy their demeanor, copy their words, copy their attitude, copy their, they're building a new world. I like that idea. How do I support that? That kind of thing.
Totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. We've just gone through, booked it through another hour, Penny.
Okay,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Okay.
And so fantastic. I feel like every time we finish off, I'm like, wow, I want to go deeper into some of these topics. So I'm excited where we're going to go next week.
Yes.
Do you have any clues about what that might be?
Yes, I do. I want to talk about the
Oh.
symbolism in the Adam and Eve story.
Wow.
When you look at the
Cool.
symbolism of that story, it tells a whole different story. So, yeah.
Penny, I'm so looking forward to this. So you can tune in with us right here on Intuition Fridays. We'll be here at the same time and next Friday. We'd love to have you join us. And let's just run through a few cards here on our way out. So while it still lasts, which is literally 2 more days, you can get 50% off the Insider Access Pass, code Monday 50. And look at this, Penny. Did you see this?
I did.
Beyond Mystic has your presentation from the conference up, so that people that weren't there and really just want to hear your presentation, they can now go on over to Beyond Mystic on the Academy and click the link below and get your presentation.
I wrote to John Claude and said, oh my God, thank you for helping spread the news about consciousness and the world that I see coming. All of the aspects, 12 different silos coming together with all new tech, all new approaches, all new assumptions, all new everything. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And of course, you can find Penny over here on her website, classes, her store, her new audiobook. You can find me on the Beyond Mystic consultations page where you can book a private 1-hour session with me. I've got openings next week, so come on over. And of course, as always, remember to follow us on Rumble. We've got some great things coming up there in the near future, and over here on YouTube. You can join me tomorrow for the Psychic Tarot Show. It's live every Saturday on both YouTube and Rumble. So any last words, Penny, before we sign off?
I think, the wish that I would make, it's really a private wish, would be to take this next week and think about all of the potential that you have in your back pocket. And every so often, just imagine you're reaching back into that back pocket and pulling out some potential, some permission, and just look at it, just contemplate it. That's it.
Beautiful. I love it. We will do that. And we look forward to seeing you here next Friday. Have a beautiful week, everybody.
Yeah. We'll see you next week, guys. Take care.
Bye for now.